Okay, so you want to open a gym, rows of squat racks catching the light through a glass storefront wall, the rubber floor smell mixed with eucalyptus towels stacked at the front desk. 40 treadmills humming at 6 a.m. before the sun's even up, nobody on, more than a third of them. A wall mounted reader beeping key fobs through the turnstile, one after another. Each beep a person you get paid for this month, whether they walk in tomorrow or not. That last detail is the whole business, quietly sitting in plain sight. Hold on to it. Here's what nobody tells you before you sign the commercial lease. The version of this business that actually prints money barely resembles the version you just pictured. The building isn't really selling workouts, it's selling something a lot stranger and a lot more predictable than sweat. And it's doing it at real scale. Roughly 77 million Americans held a gym membership in 2024, up about 20%. From before the pandemic, feeding a global fitness market worth somewhere around $121 billion a year. The gym business is one of the most misunderstood subscription models in the country because it isn't really in the business of fitness. It's in the business of good intentions that quietly go unredeemed month after month on a schedule. And the entire model depends on that happening. Start with the number that explains almost everything else that follows. Across gym industry surveys, cited so often it's become the industry's open secret, an estimated 67% of members rarely or never use the membership they're paying for. Not cut back, never come at all. Layer on top of that, about half of all new members cancel within their first 6 months, per recurring health club benchmarking data, and the average monthly membership fee climbed to roughly $69 in 2024, up from $65 the year before, though nearly 40% of gym goers pay less than $25 a month at budget chains, while boutique studios average closer to $90. Even among people who do show up, average visit frequency has been sliding from about 2.1 times a week before the pandemic down to roughly 1.5 times a week in 2024. Now, walk the math a gym owner actually runs before opening the doors. Say you sign up 2,000 members at $50 a month, right in the middle of that pricing range. That's $100,000 a month in recurring revenue before you've turned on a single light. If all 2,000 of those people showed up wanting a squat rack at 6 p.m. on a Tuesday, the business would be physically impossible. You'd need a warehouse the size of an airport terminal, not a storefront. But industry data puts regular attendance, 3+ visits a week, at only around 18 to 20% of a membership base. That's roughly 360 people cycling through a floor that only needs to comfortably hold maybe 150 of them at any given hour. The gym isn't built for its membership count. It's built for the fraction of that membership that actually shows up. And it's priced for the much larger fraction that doesn't. That gap between people paying and people appearing isn't a flaw the business tolerates. It is the business, in the same sense an airline deliberately oversells seats on a plane, correctly betting that a predictable share of ticket holders won't make the flight. One widely cited estimate puts the value of unused gym memberships across the US at well over $1 billion a year. Money that's fully collected and fully counted as revenue, attached to a service that was never actually delivered. Membership dues aren't even the whole story of where the money comes from. They're just the layer with the worst margins. Personal training, group classes, and retail sit on top of dues, and they've been quietly taking over the industry's profit picture for years. Boutique-style fitness offerings grew to roughly 43% of total health club revenue by 2019, a share that's only kept climbing since, precisely because a $150 monthly personal training package or a $30 drop-in class carries far higher margin than a $50 base membership that mostly sits unused. The base membership is the loss leader that gets someone to hand over a credit card. The upsell sitting behind the front desk, the trainer, the class pack, the smoothie bar, the branded gear on the shelf near checkout is where a well-run location actually makes its money. That base membership only pays off if it sticks around long enough to be worth acquiring in the first place. The average US gym membership lasts about 4.7 years once someone actually settles in, and industry data puts the cost of acquiring a brand new member at roughly 5 to 7 times the cost of simply keeping an existing one happy. That's why the front desk sales pitch leans so hard on annual contracts instead of month-to-month flexibility. It isn't about trapping anyone, it's that the whole model only pencils out if the average member sticks around for years of quiet non-attendance, not just a few months of an unused January resolution. Here's the other side of that same coin, and it's where gym owners actually go broke instead of getting rich off it. The revenue above is soft. It depends entirely on people staying subscribed and choosing, out of habit or guilt or forgetfulness, not to cancel every month. A member can walk away with 30 days notice in most contracts, and plenty of them do the moment a New Year's resolution fades, or a cheaper option opens down the street. The costs sitting underneath that soft revenue are hard, locked in on a very different timeline, and some of them are bigger than new owners expect going in. Commercial rent doesn't pause. Payroll, insurance, and utilities don't pause. And roughly every 7 to 10 years, that entire equipment package needs to be replaced at a cost that can run $300,000 to $600,000 or more per location. A bill that lands whether the last decade of membership revenue was strong or weak. Industry benchmarks put a typical gym's gross margin revenue minus the direct cost of running the floor at a healthy 50 to 60%. But once rent, payroll, insurance, marketing, and debt service get subtracted out, the average net profit margin that's actually left over usually lands somewhere between 10 and 15%. That's the real number that matters, and it leaves very little room in the budget to absorb a bad stretch, let alone a surprise equipment replacement. Before it turns negative, watch what happens when the soft revenue actually disappears entirely. 24-Hour Fitness was, until 2020, one of the largest gym chains in the country, running roughly 430 clubs. When the pandemic forced its locations shut, membership revenue collapsed towards zero almost overnight. The company stopped charging members outright during the closures. The debt did not collapse towards zero. The chain was carrying around $1.4 billion in obligations on top of ongoing lease commitments on hundreds of buildings, and those obligations kept accruing with no members walking through the door to fund them. It filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy that June and permanently closed more than 130 clubs, dropping to roughly 300 locations. Nothing about the equipment or the workout floor itself had changed. The fixed costs simply outlasted the subscription revenue that was supposed to be covering them the whole time. And the pandemic only finished a slide that had already started. The chain's own membership count had been slipping in the quarters right before the shutdown, as mid-tier, full-price gyms like it kept losing members in both directions, to cheaper budget chains on one side and premium boutique studios on the other. So if the person actually running the gym floor is carrying all of that fixed cost risk, stacked on top of a membership model that's quietly betting against its own attendance, who's making the reliable money here? Not who you'd guess by looking at the treadmills. The clearest place to see it is the franchise system that most of this industry actually runs on, because a franchise agreement puts the whole arrangement in writing. Take Planet Fitness, the largest low-cost chain in the country. Opening one as a franchisee currently requires a total investment, somewhere between $1.5 million and $5.2 million, according to the company's own franchise disclosure filings. Build out a full cardio and strength equipment package, working capital, plus a franchise fee, running up to $40,000 just for the right to use the name. Once the doors are open, you don't just cover your own rent, payroll, and equipment loan. You hand over roughly 7% of your gross monthly revenue as a royalty, plus another 2% into the National Ad Fund. Not 7% of profit. 7% off the top of every dollar that comes in the door, whether that month left you comfortably profitable or barely breathing. On a franchise location, doing something close to the roughly $1.8 million in annual gross sales, the company's own disclosure filings report. As typical, that combined 9% works out to somewhere around $160,000 to $170,000 a year, paid regardless of whether the location itself turned a profit. Now, look at where the parent company's own money actually comes from. In its most recent annual report, Planet Fitness Inc. broke its revenue into three segments. Roughly $301 million from franchise royalties and fees, about $189 million from the small number of clubs it operates itself, and around $72 million from selling equipment directly to its own franchisees. Read that lineup again. The corporate parent makes more money collecting a percentage of other people's gross revenue and selling them treadmills than it makes running gyms of its own. It carries almost none of the risk that sat on 24-Hour Fitness's balance sheet when the doors closed. Whether a given franchisee's club is thriving or barely surviving, the royalty check is calculated the identical way, a fixed cut of whatever came in that month. The individual owner is betting on members who mostly won't show up. The franchisor is betting on owners who will keep paying regardless. That's the real shape of this business, and it's two subscriptions, stacked on top of each other, each one insulated from the layer. Underneath it, the member pays the gym for a membership they mostly won't use. The gym owner pays the franchisor a percentage of gross revenue they can't skip, whether that membership base is profitable in a given month or not. None of this is unique to one brand. Anytime Fitness, the world's largest gym franchise with more than 5,000 locations, runs on the same basic royalty logic, and so does most of the rest of the franchised fitness world. Different percentages, different fee schedules, same underlying structure. The person on the ground carries the building, the equipment, loan, and the member attendance gamble, while the name above the door collects a fixed slice of gross revenue and, in many cases, a markup on the very equipment it required you to buy. Scarcity isn't really the lever here the way it is with a shopping mall or a sports franchise. Anyone with enough capital can open a gym. The lever is that the franchisor has engineered a position where its own revenue barely correlates with any single location's success or failure at all. It's the same instinct behind selling shovels instead of panning for gold. Just dressed up in workout gear, let a few thousand individual owners take on the real estate risk, the payroll risk, and the attendance guessing game, and collect a metered toll on all of it from a safe distance, upstream of whether any single gym in the system actually works. Run the good version of this, and it looks fine on paper. Steady renewals, holding close to the industry's roughly 66% annual retention average, a personal training and retail add-on business that pushes overall margins up toward the 20 to 30% range the stronger operators report, an attendance pattern that never spikes past what the floor was actually built to handle, and enough members quietly not showing up to keep the math comfortable rather than crowded. Every point of retention above that average compounds, keep 5 more members per 100 than the industry norm, and the acquisition costs you'd otherwise be paying to replace them simply don't happen. Run the bad version, and it looks like 24-hour fitness in the spring of 2020, a membership base that cancels faster than it renews, a wave of members suddenly asking for the refunds they'd normally never bother, claiming, while the lease, the equipment loan, and the royalty percentage keep arriving on exactly the schedule they always did, completely indifferent to how the month actually went. Same building, same equipment, completely different outcome, and the difference has almost nothing to do with how hard anyone in the building was training that year. So picture that glass storefront again. The treadmills humming before sunrise, most of them empty. The fobs beeping people through the turnstile, one after another, a lot. Of them people who won't be back this month. None of that is actually the business you're buying. The business is the gap between the person who signed up and the person who never walks back in, financed month after month by good intentions. Nobody ever collects on. Every unopened gym bag and every trunk in the parking lot is a line item on somebody's revenue statement. And the only party at the table guaranteed to get paid either way, rain or shine, packed floor or empty one, isn't standing on the gym floor at all.